It's always a privilege to be with the people who are really on the front lines of human wellness and the meaningful life and the work that you do. So it's great to be here. And it has just been an honor to be part of this interesting science that I'm going to try to convey to you that I kind of stumbled into. And it's really the science of what I like to call the meaningful life, which is more than just happiness and contentedness. It's really about even when you're grappling with difficulties such as the people that you work with, how do you find purpose and how do you find sustainable connectivity that brings you meaning. So that's where we're going to head today, and it's led me to all these really interesting collaborations and opportunities, including this kind of opportunity as well. And yeah, who would ever sit down when you're talking about the meaningful life? David very nicely mentioned a resource that we've been building up at UC Berkeley, the Greater Good Science Center. I don't know if you know about it. It's free. It takes the science that you're going to hear about, disseminates to people who are really doing the real work of what we should be doing with the science, healthcare providers, teachers, medical doctors, and the like. So that's the website. We have a new thing called the Greater Good in Action. It's ggia.berkeley.edu. We've taken the best practices that come out of the science you're going to hear about, ggia.berkeley.edu, that have been scientifically tested. And then if you're interested in building a little gratitude practice or mindfulness practice or kind of an awe walk or something like that, we've got those nicely gamified, if you will, and they're on our site to use for free. And then I also try to answer all emails. That's my email address as well. Today, in talking with David, what I wanted to do is to talk about this interesting science that I stumbled into. My new book has a lot of that science in it, but it really is about power and hierarchy. And I think one of the important things that you folks and we all as a culture need to be thinking about, which is what does excessive power and what does powerlessness do to the human psyche? And we're making a lot of advances in thinking about that. But today it's really kind of a happiness talk or a deeper meaningful life talk. So I stumbled into this literature. I was kind of a anxious, high-strung guy, studying a lot of the tougher stuff of life as a scientist, shame and depression and anxiety in kids with externalizing disorders. And I stumbled into it in an accidental way. Like in many ways, I think our culture is rethinking what meaning and purpose in life is in the past 15 or 20 years. This is really nicely illuminated by this amazing observation by historian Jonathan Glover in a book called Humanity that I would really recommend that you read. And here's what Glover observes. He surveys anecdotes from the world's battlefields of the 20th century. The First World War, Second World War, Vietnam, Korean War, and the like. And what happens with striking regularity is that when people are in combat, and my work with veterans, this just reifies this observation, and they're face to face with somebody they're supposed to kill, right? This thing happens to them where they literally cannot kill them. And bullets are whizzing by their heads. They look into their eyes of their adversary, and they collapse in what Glover calls a sympathy breakthrough, right? They weep and they are broken down. And now people are starting to talk about the moral injury that veterans feel harming people being more powerful than the physical atrocities that they may have suffered, right? One of the great examples was George Orwell, the amazing essayist, 1984. He was fighting the fascists in Spain. A fascist came into this little village he was at. He had him in his sights. He was about to shoot him. And the guy was running by, pulling up his trousers. And Orwell said, there's something about the fellow creature of the guy where there's no way I could kill him, that there's something basic. It is interesting. My science, psychological science, just didn't know what to make of this. Like, why would you feel so much compassion for an adversary? Why would we have these benevolent tendencies? And it was just ignored scientifically. And I think we've now, with 20 years of sort of serious focus, kind of built up a better story about what was it that led people to feel these sympathy breakthroughs. What is it that gives us this deep purpose? And so when I teach the science of the meaningful life at UC Berkeley, we have an online class hosted by edX called Science of Happiness, really well rated, 500,000 people enrolled. The first thing that we grapple with, and this is really important because there are no simple answers to what is the meaningful life, is it means all kinds of different things depending on your class and cultural background and then the genetic makeup that you have from your family and your family legacy. And so as we head into the science, what I always make sure people know is this is a deep, enduring inquiry, and people find it in different things. It might be about, you know, in China, the principle of Zen, which is bringing out the good in others. The Greeks had, with Aristotle, the idea of moderation, which is balance and embracing all of the passions. The Greeks had ideas about flourishing and eudaimonia and virtue. We know from economic data that justice matters a lot. We have a passion for justice and equality, near equality, and we become less happy as cultures and communities when that is problematic. We know now financial well-being, just a ton of data on, you know, that you know, if you're in poverty, it matters to make $5 more an hour. It just changes your well-being really consequentially. And then there are the things, the laughter and being in love and success at work. If I need to lift my spirits, I just go to Cancun Taqueria in Berkeley, California, have their chili verde burrito, and the sensations hit my brain, and I'm like, that is the meaningful life, right? It's many things. And I'm going to talk about 6 or 7 things that I think scientists really, as you well know, and old ideas about this suggest work. The first question when I started this, you know, when I kind of fell into this science with a crazy discovery in a lab that I may tell you about, you know, I used to get skepticism from my colleagues, like, why, Dacher? You've done work on shame and depression and anxiety, and, you know, and there's a lot of good work to do there. Why would you study something like happiness? You know, I mean, I know the Greeks talked about it and sounds fancy, but why? And there are a lot of new data reviewed by Sonia Lyubomirsky and Ed Diener and others that say that it really matters significantly. And for those of you who've raised teenagers, as I have, and they hit like teenage girls in particular, as I have done twice, still am, and they hit that bottom of, you know, teenage girls sort of hit this trough at about age 14. It's well documented, as my daughter did. You come out of it just like, you know, I don't care about her grades or if she does anything in the world. I just want her to be happy, right? It matters intuitively, but now we know, and I'll point to some kind of neurophysiological mechanisms. It matters in terms of your physical health. And they, summing up the data, suggest if you feel good about life, it's going to give you about 7.5 years of life expectancy. If you're hyper-stressed and chronically anxious, the new data suggests it's going to cost you 6 to 10 years. If you have strong patterns of social connection, there's a new meta-analysis out, it gives you 10 years of life expectancy. And what I'll show you, or just as we move through the talk, is we know contentedness, kindness, connectedness activates the vagus nerve, oxytocin levels. It sort of dampens your inflammation response, which we work on in my lab. All very direct influences upon your physical health. It stacks up with, you know, that right there. If you drink hard alcohol and eat red meat all the time, it'll probably cost you that amount of life expectancy. And I know you're asking the obvious question, like, what if I drink hard alcohol and eat red meat and it makes me happy? Am I kind of balancing it out? And it's like, I don't know. But it matters. It also matters at work. When you're feeling joyful and awe and gratitude, last night, and I've been in the power work, we know if you're a leader and you spread gratitude, that gratitude moves through your social network and makes people more productive in interactions you're not even at, right? And that's been documented in really cool ways. So we know these positive states, as Barb Fredrickson and others have shown, really boost happiness. And finally, and this hit me like a lightning rod or lightning bolt, our culture needs it, you know. You guys know this because of the work you do. It's just so striking. This is a UNICEF data, really rigorous random sample, 6 measures go into this, plotting how happy the average child is in each culture. This is in Born to Be Good, my older book. We are the higher the bar, the less happy the average child. So we are second to last in terms of the general well-being of our kids. You may be happy we beat the British yet again. Yeah, you know. But there it is, you know, those poor Brits. And indeed, Holland is always the happiest place in the world. And there are parts of Amsterdam that are just like soaring in happiness. But you know, when my daughter had the same thing her dad has, which is massive panic attacks in 7th grade and just hit this nadir, that data point was like, we got to work on that, right? There's got to be stuff we can do. So when I teach this class, and I'm going to move quickly just to make sure we have time for Q&A, when I teach human happiness on the MOOC or Berkeley, there are thousands of studies we synthesize, really nice peer-reviewed studies that are really digging into this. And this is how Sonia Lyubomirsky and Danny Kahneman, who won the Nobel Prize, and a lot of people interested in this space, think about the equation of like, as I move through my day, as my daughter working through her stuff, moves in her life, you know, what are the very specific foci that give me meaning? And it's really simple. And I'm going to probably hit on 5 of these, 6 of these. First is like just build in a few minutes each day the positive stuff, you know, joy, love. I'm going to talk about my 3 favorites, which I've devoted my lab to, which are a little counterintuitive, which are kindness, gratitude, and my favorite, which is awe. You know, prioritize connectedness. You know, it's so interesting. We are the most individualistic culture, the United States, that has ever existed in human history, right? And the data bear that out. What that means is the average American is doing something very unusual compared to our evolutionary history. We spend a lot of time alone. We spend a lot of time with strangers. We don't spend as much time as we should with friends. And the data, time and time again, you know, one of my show, like, the more you're with people, the better you do. My colleague, my postdoc, Matt Killingsworth, has this thing called Track Your Happiness, where he pings people. He has about 100,000 people, and you get a little ping, and you go, how happy are you right now? You know, okay, God, okay, 8, you know. And then he finds out what you're doing, and he has this great finding, which is you're happier doing everything with other people, right? You're happier doing homework and, you know, dancing and doing the dishes and having food and having sex and working. As long as other people are around, you're happier, right? It's also true, even if you're introverted. People are always like, I'm like Emily Dickinson. I'm so, you know, I don't like people. If you're like that, you're happier with other people around. It's usually just one person, you know, but you're just like, wow, well, maybe I don't see them, but they're over there. I feel better. So, so I will, you know, be cooperative, forgive, but I'm going to talk about touch, which I'm obsessed with. And then, you know, the big one is how do you handle stress? You know, there are data out. You guys are all young for the most part, and you too. You are young too. You and I, man. So when I graduated from college, it was a different world than when people are becoming adults today, you know. And the data show it was less stressful. The economy was different. Economic inequality was different. ISIS wasn't around. Climate change, right? Today, people are much more stressed out. And so what I'll talk about is some science on mindfulness, play, and storytelling. And I'll have a little tidbit on Inside Out on that. Okay, so really quickly, and I probably just have time for like 5 of those. This all comes out of a kind of a perspective that really hit me with force and our field with force. Why do these pro-social things matter so much? Why have we become so cooperative, kind, forgiving, playful, storytelling, and the like? And it actually took a while, and it took a female evolutionary scientist to bring this to the field's attention, which is we had this massive change in our evolutionary history, which has to do with these 2 photos here. Those are our primate relatives. The little bonobo baby, that's a small chimpanzee. You probably heard about them. Matrilineal, very cooperative. They have sex all the time. People are like, I'd like to be a bonobo, you know. And the chimpanzee, little baby right there, very self-sufficient when they're born. Our babies, because of our big brains and small pelvises, come out very premature. Most vulnerable offspring in mammalian history, taking 7 to 48 years to reach the age of independence, right? and what that meant is the carriers of our genes, if they don't survive, we don't survive, need enormous care, enormous, unprecedented compassion, and lots of social networks around them just to take care of those things and protect them. That was a game changer in terms of social structure, our emotional life, and purpose and meaning. And so in my lab, what we've shown is there's a whole, and this will help us understand why these pro-social things, which we're about to head into, are good for us. What we're finding, and it's really quite remarkable, when we show images of suffering in the lab, old regions of the brain called the periaqueductal gray light up, which is involved in caregiving. It's a very old part of the mammalian nervous system. Periaqueductal gray communicates with oxytocin networks that are distributed through your brain. Oxytocin, of course, helps us with milk letdown, breastfeeding, cooperation, sharing. It's like this neurochemical that helps us connect. And then really remarkably, we have about 12 studies showing if I feel compassion for need and suffering, the vagus nerve is activated. It's the largest bundle of nerves in the mammalian nervous system. In the human nervous system, starts at the top of your spinal cord, influences muscles in your neck that help you vocalize and move your head and look at people in the eyes, which triggers oxytocin release, wanders down to your heart and slows your heart rate down. It regulates digestion and your immune response. If your vagus nerve is healthy, it's very good news for the individual. And one of the most powerful elicitors of vagus nerve activation is compassion, which is really interesting. And a lot of the practices we'll talk about. So there's a big wing to your nervous system that helps us understand why a little bit of mindfulness, if I'm suffering from anxiety, is very good for my physical health. Sharing resources. Edith Chen is getting kids in poverty as an intervention at Northwestern to become role models for other people. So they're ennobled and empowered. That probably, the benefits of that are mediated through this neurophysiological pathway. Okay, so let's talk about practices. And compassion. I got interested in compassion, and I'll just talk to you about the data on a loving kindness practice as a tool. From this observation by Chuck Snowden, who is a primatologist, it blew my mind. These are photos of primate relatives who, remarkable. When mothers lose babies, they carry them around for a long time, in the great apes, as you see in these photos. Just as remarkably, and think about this, the implications, their friends in their networks, when they see a deceased offspring, vocalize compassion to the mother who's lost the offspring, right? So even in our primate relatives, they're showing a lot of very strategic or specific compassion. They're called coups. That's a great clue for my kind of science because it says we have this mammalian language of compassion that you can study in universal human beings. So those are called vocal bursts, which are little sounds of emotion that are probably early sounds of how we communicated in our hominid evolution emotion. I'll give you an example. Here's a sound I hear from my teenage daughters all the time. See if you know what emotion they're communicating. Right? It's like, Dad's ridiculous. I feel contempt, okay? All right, now I'm going to test you guys. Imagine you want to show interest to a client. I'm going to count to 3. Give me your best interest sound. 1, 2, 3. That was awesome. That was almost like artistic and operatic. It was like, All right, how about sympathy? 1, 2, 3. Wow, man. I should start recording these, you know. I really should. That was harmonic. So we take those sounds that you just produced. Dan Cordero, this is now published. He goes all over the world, India, remote Bhutan, where they've never been around a person from the West. Plays sounds like that. You hear the sounds, you judge. And you see, we have this here's chance guessing. They're knowing what emotions are being communicated from sounds like that. Sympathy is way above chance guessing. It is this universal language of compassion. I love this quote from His Holiness the Dalai Lama. If you want others to be happy, practice compassion. If you want to be happy, practice compassion. Really arguing that is a key. So out in the literature, if you're interested in practical things, you're probably already doing this. There are a lot of loving kindness techniques that are being tested right now. It's one of the hot interventions that people are looking at. It's really simple. Jack Kornfield is great at this. We have stuff on our website. Get people to sit, breathe, get the breathing going really deeply, which activates the vagus nerve. We've got that in our lab. And then they just think of someone that they feel close to and start to think about the feelings emanating in the chest, feel those sensations, and just cycle through. And if you get really sophisticated at it, you know, Jack Kornfield has this whole, just remember that people want others to be happy, they're going to suffer like you. You get into this deeper form of compassion. And a lot of the data suggests that a few minutes of that a week, right, are very good for the meaningful life. So Barb Fredrickson, really nice random assignment, sort of random control trial. You know, one group of people get assigned to a control condition, the other group do this loving kindness once a week. This is just plotting their happiness over time. She's got data on vagus nerve activation as well, same kind of trajectory. So just a little bit of loving kindness once a week. And a lot of these data are suggesting 3 to 5 minutes once a week is about, it's an active dose to get you there. All right, and I'm moving quickly because I want to just give you sort of 5 ideas and then hear what you guys have to say. Next stop, and this is really one of the big hits in the literature, is gratitude in the kind of the happiness literature or meaningful life literature. Anybody have a gratitude practice here? What do you guys do?
We do gratitude journals in the adult program.
All right.
Like list off as much as they can think of. Do like positive self-talk, gratitude for each other.
Wow.
Loving kindness meditations.
Nice. What else do you guys do? Yeah, Carolyn.
Email chain where there's a group of people and we just do them. We're not doing them now, but this was a couple of years ago. Whenever you felt like it, and we would get them almost every day.
Wow.
Like 10 women.
Nice.
Who would just, whatever it was.
Yep. My wife's part of that, one of those.
Amazing.
Yeah, it is. I love collecting these. One of my favorites was I was teaching these Brazilian executives. They're like, here's our gratitude practice. I'm like, the organization's 900 people. We have 900 people come in. One person is singled out. They stand on the table. People come by and like hug them and kiss them, and the samba line walks through. I was like, that's gratitude, you know. But we're a little bit more modest in how we do it. So this began with Bob Emmons. You know, really it's a once a week thing. I do it, you know, like about once a week when I'm going to sleep. Just kind of just lie there and think about 3 things I'm grateful for, right? The work I'm doing, my daughter's healthy, you know, something that happened nearby. these are the literal instructions from the first study of a gratitude intervention. Past week, think about 3 or 5 things that you feel grateful for. And Bob Emmons reviews this and shows, this one's everywhere. Boosts in satisfaction and health, kids, better grades in school. We have studies showing romantic partners who are just saying thank you a little bit more, do better longitudinally. There's a study coming out from Harvard Medical School taking people who have very poor cardiovascular profiles, different kinds of diseases. They do this intervention and their trajectories are looking a lot better. Really powerful stuff. I, in my own crazy lab, have been interested in how we express gratitude physically to other people through tactile contact. Fascinating that in the non-human primate world, they, as Frans de Waal observed, when primates share food with another primate, they trade it for getting groomed, right? And they'll sort of like, here's some food, and they're like, thanks, man. And they start grooming, and they present their rumps, and they get a little grooming back there. And these are just photos of this really interesting foundation of social ties, right? Really remarkable when you think about it, that tactile contact is the first way of building these friendships, right? In these altruistic exchanges of, sharing food and then getting this grooming going on. And that led us to a crazy study of touch as a way to express gratitude. We brought people to the lab, and one person, just think about the kind of the implications of this. One person comes to the lab, they stick their arm through this barrier. Another person shows up, we give them a list of emotions, and we say, touch that arm over there and try to communicate these emotions. They're like, this is weird, So they, okay, anger. Cha, like, ow, anger, What would you do for compassion? Yeah, so very systematically people how about gratitude? Yeah, it's kind of like that. It's like sort of a pat and a little bit of a shake, right? So you get these touches and you have to guess what just happened. I was blown away. Chance guessing is 8.33%, and for compassion, gratitude, and love, they're 6-7 times better than chance at detecting a half-second expression of gratitude. And we know neurophysiologically that's starting to stimulate comfort and calm and soothes the cortisol response. We have 2 gender differences. This is the perfect audience to figure this stuff out. When women try to communicate anger to the male arm, he had no idea what she was doing. When the man tried to communicate compassion to the female arm, she was like, I don't even think that was a human being, and had trouble. I was like, that can't be true. We replicated it in Spain, same thing, like, Dios, whatever. So touch. And then gratitude is, one of the things that people are doing now is these gratitude letters. I don't know if, just like take a moment, write a gratitude letter for someone you really feel grateful. It's very powerful intervention. Finally, and then we'll get to, I'm going to just talk about awe and move to narrative and talk about inside out. What time did you want to open it up for Q&A?
Your call.
Okay.
Probably 3 minutes. I'll make it my call. About 3 minutes.
3 minutes, okay.
I'm going to get to the airport.
Okay. Oh, that thing. Yeah, that's right. This is, so I want to just, so I'll talk about awe really briefly, and maybe you can, and then just on narrative and inside out. So awe is an amazing emotion when you feel like you're around big things and you don't understand them. And we've all had the experiences, right? And it could be, there are many things that make us feel awe, from spiritual events, rock and roll stars, that's Iggy Pop, my hero, great food, political activism. And what I just want to get to is 1 minute of awe in our, 2 minutes of awe in our studies, is we put people by this T-Rex replica. Those are my daughters yet again, when they used to feel awe towards their dad, not anymore. And people feel more common humanity in the yellow left bar next to an awesome stimulus. We took people out into the trees. Looked up into some beautiful trees for a minute. In the control condition, they looked at a science building. And they feel less self-important, less entitled. They don't need as much money to do the experiment. And they actually helped out a stranger more. And we're showing little boosts of 1 minute or 2 minutes of awe. Your stresses fade away. 1 or 2 minutes of awe. This is the finding where you guys are hearing about the inflammation response, the cytokine response as part of your inflammation that attacks pathogens in your body. Awe quiets that inflammation response, right? It calms the inflammation down that's associated with forms of depression, cardiovascular problems. Just getting outdoors is helping. And we've got these new studies where we get veterans and inner city kids and we take them whitewater rafting. And one whitewater rafting trip, we see these drops in PTSD symptoms, really precipitous, right? So capitalizing on awe and building it into how we handle stress is really important. All right, let me, sorry to skip over this, more touch, but I want to get to, you guys know about stress and cortisol, and I want to just end with, I'm happy to talk about some of the mindfulness stuff, just taking a moment to be quiet, not judge your mind, and it's working pretty well with anxiety. But I just want to end with this really interesting experience I had, so relevant to you guys, and relevant to mindfulness. Pete Dacher, who's a director at Pixar, and if that's him, called me up 7 years ago, and he's like, hey, thinking about doing a movie. I'm like, I'm with you, I've got some good voices, Pete, try this one, I don't have a good voice for movies. And he's like, and I want it to be about emotions. And I know you teach emotion at Berkeley. And I'm like, I'm your guy. And it's gonna be about emotions in an 11-year-old girl going through a crisis. I had an 11-year-old girl going through a crisis, so did Pete at the time. And I'm like, Pete, I'll call you in 5 years. And we dug into it, and what was really interesting, what I think was, and you guys know this, but the feedback has been astounding of like how a movie does what you do for Americans, right, and for worldwide. Like, that life is filled with conflict. That's just part of human life. It's designed to be that way. As one of my Berkeley undergrads, who was a former homeless veteran, now going to med school, I asked them what they thought of the movie, and he's like, man, that was the darkest movie I've ever seen in my life, because it embraced what you guys embrace with, right, which is conflict, tensions between parents, even in a high-functioning family, temper tantrums, running away. And the lesson of the movie, and the great hero of it all, was that person right there, And I think it really changed our thinking about sadness. And you guys have been doing this work way ahead, but now people are coming up to me, because sadness is such an empowering figure, and saying, so you're telling, the movie is saying, I had a guy after yoga like, so it's okay to be sad? I'm like, it's okay to be sad. I was like, oh man, I'm just transformed, and I'm not kidding. I mean, like daily I get these emails and people saying, my daughter was traumatized. She saw the film 6 times. And it gave her this platform to say, that's part of life, and I'm growing in new ways. And that's what the film really told us. And we know, when I was talking to the team, it's like, we know if you clamp down on your sadness, it's going to heighten stress and so forth. We know if you embrace it mindfully, you'll be better off. And so I feel like the film was a great exercise in that. There's so much more to talk about, but I want to make sure you keep in mind, here's the edX site, here's this, greatergood.berkeley, and now I look very forward to what you guys are thinking about and your questions and thoughts. So thank you.